I'm Adam Walker, a biometrics consultant, and this is the Pharma Prescribed podcast, where leaders, innovators, and hidden voices in healthcare open up. No sound bites, no spin, just raw insight, one prescription at a time. In an industry driven by data, protocols, and pressure, we rarely pause to ask the human questions. What drives us? What breaks us? And what truths live behind the titles we wear? Helene Quie is a strategic decision maker, founder and CEO of qmmed Consulting, a global healthcare consultancy CRO, driving medical device innovation. With more than 25 years at the intersection of science, regulation, and commercial strategy, Helene advises startups and established MedTech firms, helping leadership teams translate breakthrough ideas into market-ready products. Her career includes senior operational roles across leading MedTech organizations. In 2006, she founded qmmed to bridge innovation and regulation while elevating patient safety and commercial success. Today, qmmed supports MedTech pioneers across Europe and beyond, guiding clinical innovation, regulatory transitions, evidence generation, and organizational transformation. So, Helene, for those of our audience who are not familiar with you, who are you and what is the mission you're on?
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me for the podcast. So, who am I? I'm a MedTech specialist. I like really to phrase me like that or put that label on. I've been in this industry for many years, and what really drives me is this extremely fascinating industry where you develop tools and material that can enable better health. So I am on a mission because I'm not an engineer, I'm a cell biologist. I can't put things together, I can't build products, but I can help those who can do that in developing products that are placed on the market for the patients that are sick and need help and support. And that is really what fascinates me and drives me every day.
Thank you for explaining that. Would you mind just elaborating on the difference between medical technologies and devices as opposed to clinical trials and what other people might understand to be clinical transformations?
Yeah. So what's really different within this world of medical devices and medical technology is that it's extremely diverse. Both before I started qmmed and after, you have, first of all, an extremely young regulation. So when I started in 95 at Cook Medical, the directive for medical devices and market release in Europe just came out in 93. And therefore, there were no procedures. There were no nothing. We call it normally the cowboy land because it was the Wild West, basically. But it was also that time where we had really innovative solutions made the interventional radiology, cardiology, treating patients from small incisions in the skin. You could treat the heart and the brain for people that were about to die from a stroke. So there has been a lot of development within the regulation in Europe and in US also, but it was meant as a free trade regulation or legal foundation in the start and has developed to really a strong foundation for how to develop devices. But because it's so diverse, it's hospital beds and it's also an artificial heart. It's the software application that you have on your phone, and it's the software in some of the machines that are at the hospitals, the big MRI machines. So to have a regulation really that covers all of that aspect, and the whole journey has been on for the last 20, 30 years, that's where we really see this market. It is a market. You want to sell these products, but you also want to sell safe products and products that performs. To have been part of that is really where the fascination comes from. And it's the transformation that has been quicker and quicker over the years, basically. It happens faster and faster.
Thank you for explaining that. That's a wonderful insight that you've given us. And indeed, in my past, I have also worked in medical devices. And the example I often give is the hospital bed being a medical device, as well as stents that go into the body. And I think that's a really good insight for our audience to understand the difference, because I think at last count, there may be 50 to 60,000 different medical devices listed, at least by the MHRA, that I was aware of when I was working in that field. And it is so diverse. Where do you start with trying to get your arms around not just the regulations, but how you advise companies on best practice?
Yeah. Where we actually start normally is to explain that this is a framework for how to develop medical devices. It's like that in Europe and in US and in other regions, but we normally take Europe and US as the main regions, just to have examples. In Europe, we are running this very much based on risk assessment. So for sure, the risk in developing a hospital bed compared to the risk developing an artificial heart, two different things, but it's the same regulation, which is up to the manufacturer. And this is where we as a service organization, we support our clients in having that understanding and seeing the risk not only from a medical perspective, but how do I transform that into and this is where really the gold is, how do I transfer that into my documentation? Because it's not enough any longer to just have, like in the old days, as in cowboy times, to really have a very good products. There are 2,000 steps in between where this risk consideration is always part of it. And it's each and every step until the commercialization, you still have to be able to justify and discuss and debate the risk level and the efficiency of the product and what is it actually worth for the patient and the hospital or the user. And that needs to be built on documentation. So this is where we as a service provider helps to get that documentation package in place. And that is, it's the same that you do for a hospital bed than you do for the heart, artificial heart. But of course, the detail level are two different places. So this is where you have to have some kind of experience in navigating that, because it's up to you, where I think more in pharma, there is a difference. You have kind of to go through check. You do this trial, you do this trial. With devices, you have to argue that I either do trials or I don't do trials. And if I do trials, I need a first in man. Maybe I don't need a first in man, but it's based on my risk. And then I do a pivotal. Maybe I don't do as big a pivotal trial as others has, because I'm planning to do more post-market, so after it has been CE marked. So that whole argumentation based on risk and justifications and available data, this is where I think the fascination for me at least comes. You have to put all these small building blocks together and then create it into a success story for the client or the manufacturer for that specific product so you can treat patients. I think that's magnificent.
I'm hearing a wide diversity of opportunity in learning, as much as where do you find that expertise? Because you referenced the fact that there are obviously many regulations that you have to follow, but if you're assisting in a cardiac device, you need cardiologists, presumably. You need experts to advise you on what might be best practice, what might work, what might not work. Never mind the risk, benefit, and the documentation that sits with that. Where do you start with that?
I think you start by, depending on at what stage you are with the company, you have to consider what open questions do I actually have. And then at the end of the day, you need to use your product at the market. We call it a use case. And funnily enough, here in Europe, we are, I don't know how many countries. The use case per country is different, per hospital, per. So you really have to dive down in the detail of how my idea is going to be used when it's actually being used for a patient, and how are they being used today. So what is standard of care today at the hospitals? And this is where you need, if it's a cardiology product, you need the cardiologist, but you might need or both to speak with a cardiologist in US and in Europe, two different hospital systems. And in Europe, you have different countries. So you can't pick all 28 countries or how many we are. You might be picking 5. These are what I'm focusing on. Germany is different from France. Denmark is different from. So that whole strategic game you have to play and position yourself, selling your idea into these systems, hospital systems, because you need data. You need to set up clinical trials here. You need to check that the thought process you had behind the standard of care with your new product, that use case, is actually going to fly. So there you need to strategically really think very clear, not stay only down in your sandbox, but really up, check it out. Can it fly? And I think this is where the companies that do this well, and we've seen a couple here over the years, they are very successful. But companies that don't have that oversight or understand that you need to stick your nose out and get some feedback on not only your device, but actually how it's going to be used in that setting, is really key for the whole understanding of how am I going to develop this. Otherwise, you will end just before the clinical trial or right after the clinical study, because a clinical study is an artificial setup. You sign a contract with a hospital to do this, and they will most likely do it. But then after this, the day-to-day business might be different, and no one will buy your product, or few people will buy your product. So that whole setup and that is really key.
Thank you for explaining that, Helene. I'm wondering how you identify good people to come into this organization, but also I'm sensing that from your own perspective, you've learned through doing. This has been the hard yards over the last 25 plus years that you've been doing this. How do you translate that for the next generation of people coming into your organization, never mind supporting medical devices in the future?
I think it's important to teach and train and share knowledge. So I'm a big fan of sharing, basically because it's necessary. We all want safe products that performs and treat patients. I think smart and clever people can always sit down and talk about the guidances and the regulation. They can probably also talk about how to implement it and put the processes in place. But to get up a little bit in a helicopter view and see the different processes and how they could influence each other, you need experience. And you need experience with situations that have both went good and bad. So we learn equally from bad experience and where we have failed the hard way. I have been around the block for about 30 years. I've tried bits and pieces. I would know bad situations or when you could end up in problems, but I also learned you can't always just tell that. You can't say the wolf is coming because no one will listen at the end, but you can stand there and help afterwards and then guide in cleaning up, because people will do it anyhow because they need the experience themselves. I think it's just human nature, right? But it's by teaching and training and coaching, telling the story, being out there, sharing. That's key.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm aware that you've run your own podcast as well. And many of those lessons that I think you've learned along the way, you've put out there into the public domain. So you're very open to sharing your information. You're not withholding that knowledge.
No.
It's very much a sharing mentality. Where does that come from?
When I started out within this business, I started out at Cook Medical. And at that time, Cook Medical it's a big factory just around the corner here from where I live. And with completely flat organizations run by a US privately owned MedTech company. And as I say, it was really early stage. But I learned there because the structure was so flat that by interacting with each other, and because no one knew what I actually could contribute with, I think I was the second academic person hired in Cook. So they were all from the hospitals, they were engineers. So they never had anyone who came with a university degree within cell biology. They had no clue. And I probably didn't have a clue what I could contribute with. I just actually wanted to become a doctor. And I was too lazy in the high school, so I had to find out how do I get close to this world. So I ended up with cell where I knew physiology, anatomy, and other things. And I didn't use the cell biology part that much, but I used the medical part of my education. But I came with a structure. And I think I taught some of the people in the groups that I was working with, that by having structure, making plans, making protocols, tracing the data, which I learned at the university, right? You test and then you go backwards and you test again and then you test again. And you do that 3 times. That whole mindset helped me, but it was together. I had to transform that into a language that these engineers in the other room, they actually understood that she actually comes with something here, some numbers. And when we've done that, I can do this next step and I can speak with that physician and I can actually use that to convince him to do this. Maybe we did a lot of anatomy model testings at that time for cerebral aneurysms. Okay, maybe we can do that into a verification test model. Maybe we can move outside of the house and do testing actually closer to the physician. And then the marketing people called and said, I think I want to join these meetings. You're close to my customer, you know what? And then we started up. I don't think that we exactly knew what we were doing, but learning that by sharing my basic DNA with others, just made these the best days of my life. I had so much fun. I learned so much. And I brought that into qmmed, that if we do this sharing what everyone can do here, we will make magic. But it's the only way. You can't sit in a box and make magic. Then you are a magician. But we are not. We're just hardworking people with some skills and competences. But together we really do magic every day.
I think that's a wonderful insight that you share there. We have many things in common, but one of them is also that I also wanted to be a doctor.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I wasn't able to do a medical degree either. And almost word for word, as you say, I just wanted to be around doctors. I say the same all the time.
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm not the smartest person in the room. I just want to be around medical anything, medical people, medical anything. So we have that in common. And also the way that you describe the scientific methodologies is so similar to the way that my brain works as well. And on a third point, you know, that commonality, you're based in Copenhagen in Denmark. It's a place that is incredibly close to my heart, having lived and worked there for a couple of years in 2015 to 2017. The mentality of the Danes, I need to touch upon that because you've described it. I see it and I hear it in everything that you're talking about. But perhaps you can elaborate around that, because there is a certain culture of openness and warmth and care that I experienced there in Copenhagen, in Denmark particularly, that I'd love if you could just elaborate a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I can. So Denmark is a small country. We are very few people, actually, when you get to it. We're 6 million people. Of the 6 million people, half of us are working. Half of the half is working in the public. The other half is in private. Sometimes we are competing with the Finnish and I think the Norwegian people in being the happiest people in the world. But we are, I would call it, we're super spoiled in a system where we're being normally treated well and that we have opportunities to go to the university. It's the tax money that pays for us to go there. It's the tax money for the hospitals. We have a culture. I know we talked about the Round Tower in Copenhagen. We have an office just next to it. But there's a history, right? I'm sitting next to the Round Tower that Christian IV made in 16, I think it's 42. It's the code for the door and then plus something. So every time I forget the code to the door, I look at the Round Tower. And then someone told me the other day, you have to add a couple of numbers. I didn't actually realize that, which is embarrassing. But we have a culture of being around for a long time and being a large country. So we have also this, we are good at some things and we are very good within MedTech. We have very smart people within MedTech and we have some very large companies that contribute They stay in Denmark, they pay the tax, they pay to our whole system, and they actually feed into a system that within innovation to nurture that industry back. It's within Pharma, it's within MedTech. Novo Nordisk is one. Cook is in Denmark. We have a radiometer. We have a lot of large companies. So MedTech is a big industry. The universities have specific branches to degrees to develop people into that industry. They're picked directly from Novo Nordisk and other organizations, right from the university, and then they pull them through a program, but they have the basic knowledge. And having that, a lot of smart people within this industry just makes it a very interesting place to be, basically. And because we are small, we don't stay here. Like, we could look in other countries, Americans, they're very American. When you have France also tends to stay in France. But in Denmark, we have to reach out because there isn't enough here. There isn't enough brainware. There isn't enough money in the system. We have to spread out also for other markets. So that combined with a lot of competences and know-how, and that the Vikings crossed the big ocean and went to America. And we have that. We don't stop because we're just too small, right? So in our teams, I think there is a good basis for this industry. And I'm pretty proud of it, actually. A lot of good ideas comes out of here. The heart valve, for instance, was made, the first one, if I remember correctly, at one of the hospitals in Jutland by a well-known physician. So we have some very good places there. And that's the last branch. Rigshospitalet is very close to the office. It's 6 minutes with the bus. I can go in and say hello to a doctor, and they are available. They make themselves available. It's also important for the hospitals. They have it as a business to support that industry. And they also earn money. So it's not true just that they are saints. They make it as a business to be part of this whole MedTech universe and be part of developing new products and be part of clinical studies.
I really appreciate that insight that you shared there, Helene. And it echoes the experience that I had working alongside many people at Novo Nordisk when I was located in Copenhagen. It was that sense of contribution that everyone was contributing.
Yeah.
And this isn't a political point, but what I noticed very much was that it was so different to the experience I'd had back home here in England and in various other countries that I'd worked and traveled to, because that contribution is in the DNA of the country. As you say, people are funded to do 2 degrees. Everyone can do 2 degrees. That's remarkable, beyond remarkable. And in every meeting that I was present, there would be far more qualified people than me with multiple degrees, speaking multiple languages, highly capable people working in all sorts of different fields. It really was transformative for my career as much as from a personal point of view, because when my wife and my kids came and visited and we had holidays in Denmark, they also saw what a remarkable country it was, how kind the people were, and how welcoming the nation is to people coming into the country. We had some incredible holidays there, and we also just experienced a lot of wonderful culture, not least the food, the lifestyle, the outdoors, and that happiness thing that you speak about. It's not a cliche to say that the people that I worked alongside were happy. Even in the darkest of days, in the winter months, when we were cycling to work in the dark, cycling home in the dark at the end of the working day, it was a different experience to what I experienced here in the UK. I can't quite put my finger on it. But the first day that I started at Novo, they gave me a bicycle. That was my welcome gift.
Yeah.
And it stayed with me for the 2.5 years that I was commuting there.
Yeah.
And I also went to spin classes after work. I went to yoga classes. We had stretching together.
Yeah.
We had Fridays with cake.
Yeah.
Everything that I was exposed to was just on a different level of wonderful.
Yeah.
And I learned what Hygge really meant. Perhaps if you could tell me what Hygge means to you, because I can't translate it.
Hygge, yeah, it's a Danish word that doesn't exist, I think, in other languages. The situations and the feeling might be there, but it's a Danish expression, hygge, for that thing that we have together. I normally say, because I tried to get my family close to me, so they all live around here. And I normally say, we just hang out. We just spend time together. And that's Hygge, because it's not with a purpose. You're not guest. You just join me in my house and we spend time together. I try with our clients. I try to spend time with my clients just to get to know them, because there are people behind. And of course, there is a business part, but I'm equally a people's person, that I want to get to know the people that I'm working with. So yes, the business part, we are earning money on this, that's for sure, but it's the ideas and the whole community around that company is important to understand. But this is where Hygge comes from, and it moves into the companies, right? As you say, we have now 40 employees in total, an important part. I'm being asked all the time, and I'm unfortunately a little too busy, but they have this need to have Hygge, for sure. They want to do a run together after work, and they want to have cake in the afternoon. And it comes by itself over time that they have these connections and they create that really strong relationship to each other, which is great. And it makes it much more fruitful to go to work. Beside developing devices, they're also developing relations, both with the clients and internally. And I find that extremely important.
Yeah, I absolutely echo that and couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned about the size of the company. I would imagine that most of those people have been with you for a long time, haven't they?
Some has. I like that people stay as long time as possible, but I also know within the world where I work, being a small company, if you have ambitions, it might not be the last stop with me because I'm too small. Then go out and then you come back. Come back when you're ready. I can't always develop people in that direction that they want because of the size of the company. We also are flat in our organization, so I can't develop 10 different layers of managers. So they stay, people look happy, content, then I'm happy, but they don't always stay forever. And I don't expect so, because you have to move. You have to get out there, get some experience, and then come back when you're ready. So that's my philosophy in a way.
I think it's a really pleasant way of looking at it, is you give people roots
Yeah,
and you give them wings. It's a
yeah,
bit like being a parent,
yeah,
isn't it? It's the
yeah,
same
yeah,
that my wife and I say to our kids,
yeah,
you've always got a home whenever
yeah,
you want to come back.
yeah.
But in the
Let me
meantime,
know.
jump on a plane and
Yeah,
go and see the world.
yeah,
Come back when you're ready.
yeah,
It's the same principle.
yeah. Because there is limitations. I would love to do much more, but it's then not a good business. And if I don't have a good business, it's not solid and no one is happy. So there are choices you have to make as a CEO. And it's the same when we talk to our clients. There sometimes I see these clients that wants to do everything, and I'm just, oh, you have to take a decision here, my friend. You are killing yourself with, I can see the ambitions. I can see both with the device and the people, and you are too many or you're too few, and it's wrong competences or it's the wrong use case, or you have to focus and you have to find that, we either call it the red thread or the golden thread, but you have to build up that story. And again, sometimes with the employees that the clients have around them might not be the right fit. And of course, there we can step in, but we will never become the company, even though that we try. So I think that's important discussions that I enjoy having with CEOs and other strategic developers, that you have to take decisions, and every decision means that you take something away, right? But it makes it clearer and it brings you closer to a success, either success to close something down or success to actually get something to the market. If we say that we are all here to develop devices, then I think that's clear. If it's too muddy, you will fail, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think to get a perfect decision, it never happens, does it? I've heard it
No,
said before, 51% is good enough to make a decision.
absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes when we do seminars, we see startup companies that have been startup companies maybe for 10 years, then I get concerned on their behalf. Even your use case, which was a good idea 10 years ago, might not be a good use case today. So why are you still around? Might be a good idea, still might be a good idea, but it might also be that you're stuck, right? And you can't move on. So why are we doing this? So I think these discussions are important to have. And of course, they are become a very old, very irritating woman in the room. But I think it's important to talk about, don't waste people's money or your time in something which are not supposed to be happening.
I think that's a rich insight to share. I also wonder, given your experience now, what is it that you're seeing for MedTech and the future? Because things are changing really fast, aren't they? You talked about people sitting on an idea for 10 years. I don't think anyone's sitting on anything for more than 10 minutes right now. I'd love to know your insights into what for the future of your industry and what that might play out like for QMed.
Yeah. I think that the world is a little bit turning upside down these years, and it has been. I've been doing this for 20 years, so I know it goes up and down, and I stopped getting a heart attack every time it goes down. I realized this is happening. But what really has changed it, and it moves with a much higher frequency, the up and down. And these days, I think that we are in a period where there are some worldwide changes, disturbances, changes in the process, and that makes people insecure. There is actually, as far as I can see and hear, enough money in the industry, but the security in making sure that actually, as we just talked about, that the products get out there on the market and that you can sell it. They want much more security that this actually happens. It means that money goes to fewer, but more money goes to these companies. It leaves startup companies without funding for 10 years, but will maybe not a good idea. And they have to take that decision how they are going to move on. An average medical device, it's about 2 to 3 years on the market, then something else is being invented, and over a period, that product will die out. That's the difference from pharma, where you have much longer leadway. Devices, they come and they die very quickly. So I see that as a change, that the money flow has changed. With the new regulation in Europe, the narrative around how difficult Europe is still existing. I'm working very hard to try and change that, because Europe is still the second largest market. The fact that we got a new regulation is not what really hinders us to develop new devices. There is a lot of the new innovations that goes to US. FDA is really happy these days. They even make surveys to document how good it is to go and introduce new innovative devices in US, while we're still struggling a little bit with our storytelling around MDR. And again, because we are different countries, the European Commission and FDA is one place, one unit, one spokes. We have some troubles getting our ducks in a row and get the story right. But I see so much innovation, and I see a lot of great ideas and companies that are really growing, and they are stumbling and they get in trouble, because the importance of building that red thread, the golden thread, or whatever we call them, has become so much more important. You cannot have verification, validation, clinical studies. They cannot be separate anymore. You need to build up that whole story into one story. And if you don't have that right from the start, you will get delays and you will have more failures and so on. So I think that's where we are right now. And how it influenced the CRO business is that I think the main business has changed a bit, and we need to reflect the world around us. And as I can only speak for myself, when I ask a lot of questions to other CROs, I can hear, and when I listen to them, is that they're also in a restructuring phase and adapting that new universe, very much focused on US, Europe still struggling a bit, larger companies, but with a lot of funding. And how do we then fit in? Because we are the extended arm between the authorities and the understanding. We're kind of the glue that helps where the companies can't do themselves or choose not to. So how do we now fit into that space? I think that's changing. That's what I spend my walks on when I'm thinking about how to do this. It's different, but it's doable.
And dare I ask, Do you see that there is a change coming with the advent of AI, machine learning, and overlaying that within the medical device arena? Have you seen that firsthand?
Yes, I do think that it's already there. It is both the regulation now needs to be implemented and understood, and how we need to work with it. But the whole thing of integrating AI in all the processes where it's applicable and still have the human oversight, that's the fine balance we need to find, because it is a magnificent tool. I enjoy it a lot because it is challenging my brain where I don't have enough capacity myself. It's not because it's always right. It definitely isn't, but it challenged my way of thinking, and the other processes that it sees into situations that I didn't see because I'm preempted for something with my story, my history, and it gives me new perspective. I can take it or I can leave it. So that's up to me still. But I get much more opportunities, and I like that. But it's regulatory wise a burden for the devices and all these things. But oh my God, it can do magic. Really, I'm impressed.
I agree with you. And coming back to that scientific methodology piece, it's like having another person guiding you, sat alongside you, a very highly experienced person.
Yeah.
You don't always agree with them. You challenge them back.
Yeah.
But it really is very powerful and worthwhile, isn't it? Certainly in smaller organizations where you need sometimes a spark of imagination or an idea.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it shows you where the holes are. Of course, you need to prompt it in the right way. But no, I think it's becoming a really great tool. But again, it probably will change the way that we are working, because we will be the same people at the companies that are then now producing the documents, and then we are checking the documents. We're not necessarily producing the documents. The AI tools can do that. Maybe the person at the company don't have the competences to prompt the document the right way. Then we will do that, and then they will check it with the AI tool at the company. So we get an extra hand, actually, in that it's becoming a triangle. And we see clients that are actually asking us for proposals with and without use of AI. So it's already there.
It's really interesting to hear, and thank you for elaborating on that, Helena. At this point in the conversation, I like to conclude with a quick fire round. So I'm wondering, what is the one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Have more patience. I'm extremely impatient, but I learned the hard way to breathe, wait, and then it will come. Patience.
What are the top 3 qualities you value most when building a team?
Oh, I like the humor. Let's also have fun, right? If we can both have humor and really skill bright discussions, and then we have empathy for each other, then I'll go for it.
What is your favorite thing outside of work?
I have 4 grandkids, and I know I skipped the level of my daughters. Of course, also my daughters, and then, but my family. I really enjoy spending time because I have 3 boys and 1 girl under 6 years. You just can't think of work. It's the skater park, or you have to see the new drawing, and you just can't think about a new partner, right? You just have to be there present.
You've given an amazing insight in there. And I don't know how you fitted in all those children and grandchildren and built that career, by the way.
You just have to. You know what they can do? They can do FaceTime. So that's how it is. If they insist on your presence, so they call you on FaceTime. The other day, it was the one at 6. He called my husband and said, "Can we hang out on FaceTime?" You have to be there.
It's very similar. My kids are both at uni and they do the same. They FaceTime middle of my working day, middle of my wife's working day. And the same thing. They just want to be in the virtual room with you, don't they?
Yeah, just be present here now. I need to speak to you.
And finally, what is your number 1 golden rule in life and in business?
Golden rule. I think my golden rule is that there is always a pattern. So if I keep an eye on the patterns, I'm academic, so I look for that red thread. There's always a story, things fit together, and it doesn't always come. There's nothing out of the blue. It comes from something. And then if you prepare yourself and your mindset, you will both be a good person, a good boss, and a good grandmother and mother. So just watch for that. That's my rule.
Thank you, Helene. We've had a wonderful conversation today. I've really enjoyed not just getting to understand a lot more about qmmed consulting, but also from a personal level, you shared some really rich insights into your drive and determination in building an organization and the
Thank you.
learning that has served you all the way through that, never mind the principles that I absolutely align with in and around the Danish culture. So thank you so much for coming on Pharma Prescribed today. For any of our audience who'd like to reach out to you, what's the best way of making contact with you, Helene?
In these modern days, I think I have about 5-6 platforms. As I said, my grandsons are using one of them, but LinkedIn for sure, or the info email, or just email. And these days, calling me is problematic because if I don't know the number, I might not pick up because it might be someone from China. But the other routes, LinkedIn, info email, just find me. I will always answer. And I'm always open for a cup of coffee. I'm interested in hearing from people where the good stories are.
Thank you so much, Helene. It's been a delight to welcome you on Pharma Prescribed today.
Thank you for inviting me.